Hey everybody, John Mark here. Welcome to Mark My Words. In this video, I'm going to tell you how we, and when I say we, I mean all of us Americans who support these measures, can and must reset America. I'm going to give you 9 massive changes that we can make to our system that are going to improve the lives of the vast majority of Americans, actually on either side of the political spectrum, massively. I am a right-winger, I make no bones about that, but these measures are going to massively improve the quality of life of even the left-wingers. Because what's happening in America today is, yes, we have the two sides that don't like each other, a lot of political polarization, but a lot of the problem is with our system. Our system needs some major upgrades, some major changes, and that will reduce and eliminate a lot of the stress, a lot of the angst from the American people. So let's talk about that. Before I do, very briefly, I want to just let you know that I'm going to be starting a new show on my channel very soon called The Reset America Show. And I'm going to have a proprietarian panel. Proprietarianism is where a lot of the insights of the changes that we need to make that I'm going to be talking about today come from. It's a relatively new school of thought. And there's just a lot of common sense and wisdom and some very innovative things in it too. So we're going to be talking about a lot of that. We'll be talking about current events and how a lot of these insights and changes and solutions that we have to offer can and will be implemented and must be implemented, because we have the solutions, folks. We know what to do now. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about, even in this video, high level, is what you might call scientific governance. All right, so you're not going to want to miss this. Keep your eye out for this. It's going to be probably every other week. It may end up being every week. We shall see. But I want to let you know about that very quickly. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. All right, how to reset America. Let's go right into it. Number 1, the first huge thing that we must do to reset America and eliminate the vast majority of this huge stress that we have in America right now is we must separate the red areas from the blue areas. Look at this map. This is a map of the 2016 election by county. Blue obviously being counties that went Democrat, red counties that went Republican. Look at this map and ask yourself why all these people are living under the same set of rules. Why are all these people, 330 million people, living under the same set of rules and policies? Yes, we have some variations by state, but a lot of the problem is we have these huge national level elections where everybody's totally stressed out. What if the other side wins and shoves their will down my throat? I'm all stressed out about that. Why do we have what we could call a monopoly democracy, where whoever happens to get the most votes, and it's almost comical how close it is as far as just sheer, raw numbers. It's just an absurd situation when you look at this map. This map is a 3D map, so you can see the population distribution. You can see how the great majority of left-wingers live in a handful of big leftist cities, urban areas. Why in the world are those places shoving their will down the throats of the red areas and vice versa? Why? The only reason, folks, is this. Our state lines are outdated. Take a look at Florida, for example. Why in the world is all of Florida living under one set of rules? Look at Miami area, the blue area, and the red areas. Why should all those people have to live under the same rules? It's ridiculous. It's utterly moronic. It's an absurd state of affairs. So the simple solution to this is to just redraw the lines. And so what we call the proprietarian constitution, or the strengthened American Constitution, has a very common sense and very clever, actually, way to allow the people to redraw the lines of their localities and state lines so that they can have polities that suit their desires much more. Okay? Now, if we don't do something like this, I'm going to be very straight with you, there's going to be a war. Okay? Very soon the Republican Party is not going to be able to win any elections just because of immigration. Now, I know immigration is temporarily suspended, But that's not going to probably last. I mean, it's only for 60 days, which is already partway done with. Even if they extend it a little bit because of this current situation, very soon the Republican Party is not going to be able to win any elections because these immigrants that are coming in, most of them are non-whites, the vast majority of them, and non-whites vote consistently more than 2-to-1 left-wing in every election. And this has been the case for decades. Nothing is changing that pattern. So when the Republican Party figures out they can't win any more elections, we're going to have a very volatile situation, obviously. And you need to watch my video, Civil War II in America, Who Would Win? I'll put the link in the top comment if you haven't already. It has 1.7 million views. You need to watch that to understand that if you're a left-winger especially, you don't want a war. Let me just give you a heads up. So the common sense thing to do is to just separate. Every single one of our states in America is the size of a European country. Okay? So this whole thing where we have a monopoly democracy is ridiculous. And no wonder there's huge stress. One of the biggest lessons you have to learn is that people are very different from each other. We understand scientifically now why left-wingers are different from right-wingers. They are fundamentally different. Even a lot of it goes down to the biological level. So if you think you can convince the other side, forget about it. You can't. All right? We understand this. So the logical thing is to separate and let each group of people kind of go their own way. And yes, I know there's logistical things, but, you know, we went to the moon, folks. You think we can't figure this out? Come on. All right. Number 2, we need to end the Fed and replace what the Fed does with the Treasury. And specifically what I mean is we need to end the way the banking system charges interest on mortgages and on car loans, consumer interest, what you might call it. There's absolutely no reason for bankers to have the ability and have the power to bring money into existence out of thin air, which they do have, by the way. And by the way, both sides, left and right, can totally agree on this. The grassroots of both sides, there's absolutely no reason we can't agree on this and insist upon this. We must end the Fed and end this thing where bankers bring money into existence out of thin air and charge you interest on it. You got to understand, bankers are not, it's not like they're doing what a carpenter does, where they take a raw piece of wood and they put a lot of labor into it and a lot of skill into it, and then they turn it into a chair and sell it at a profit. That's not what they're doing. They're typing numbers into a computer and charging you interest on it. That's it. I'm talking about like a mortgage or a car loan, okay? All you do, and folks, this is very simple. There have been people, there are millions of people in America that understand the Fed has to be ended in one way, shape, or form. This banking system is pure debt slavery, okay? We did not have it for all of our history. This has been an old battle that has gone back to the beginning, almost to the beginning of America. I could put a bunch of quotes on the screen from founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, people like this, that said, do not let bankers bring your money into existence. And they put it, they say it with slightly different words, but that's what they're saying. Andrew Jackson fought the banks. Okay, in 1913, the bankers won. We need to reverse that victory and have our own victory. And all you do is have, if you need a house loan or a car loan, what you do is instead of going to a bank who's going to charge you interest on it, so you end up paying twice as much money over a 30-year loan for your house as what the house was actually worth when you bought it, just because of the interest. All that money is going to bankers. What are they doing? What skill are they adding to the equation? Zippo. Nothing. Nada. Okay? All you do is, instead of going to a bank, you go to the Treasury for your loan, and the Treasury gives you your loan with the same, you can have the same creditworthiness criteria and stuff like that. But instead of having interest on your loan, you have a zero interest loan. Okay? And the same with a car loan. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of this. This is something that smart people, talk about and discuss. I just want to give you the high-level concept here. This will give the American people massive freedom from debt slavery. And you will see a massive economic explosion. I'll say this as well. If you're a business leader, every other business in America outside of bankers should be jumping up and down in joy with this idea. Because imagine if all the people of America, instead of paying interest to bankers on their mortgages and car loans, instead of spending all that money every month on that, they can spend their money on your products and services, other businesses of America. All right. These first two right here. I mean, I could end this presentation right here. I won't, but I could. This right here. I mean, if all we did was this, and left and right can agree on both of these things. This is huge. By the way, folks, send this to everybody. And like I said, I'm a right-winger, but this is a very bipartisan message in many ways. Send this to everybody that you know. Post it in every online group. And I don't care if you know my name. This is not about me. This is about, we got to fix this thing. We can't hand off to our children and grandchildren this debt slavery thing. Where, you know, in the 50s, people could work one job and the woman could stay home if she wanted to, because you could make enough money with one income coming into the house. Now you got to have two incomes. And it's because of this debt slavery thing, because of this banking thing. If you don't understand it, you can watch a video series called The Money Masters that will explain some of the history to you, probably on YouTube or BitChute or something. All right, number 3. This kind of goes with number 1, obviously. We need to return most power that is now at the federal level to the states and to any new local areas. Like I said earlier, you could have state lines redrawn, etc. It might not be 50 states anymore. It could be a different number of states. But most of the federal power needs to be returned to that. The Founding Fathers were wise in the sense that they definitely did not intend this massive federal bureaucracy. They intended most of the power to be at the state level, and the federal level was basically just to facilitate business. Okay, so if we returned everything except for the Treasury, because it is there's a few things that is beneficial to have at the federal level. It's beneficial for the whole landmass of America. The Treasury, the military, obviously, and a couple other things, like at least enough of a judiciary at the federal level to decide things between the states commercially or whatever the case may be, and like assistance for disasters, you know, hurricanes or something like that. Other than that, everything else should be at the state level. Why? Because that reduces power distance. One of the things that is making people very, very upset, like we talked about earlier with the map we saw, and we're seeing it in different places in the world, is that the elites have an incentive. They just want more and more scale. So what happens in these big corporations, so what happens is they just want to expand everything and make everything super to where they're controlling massive scale of everything. They want more and more power that they control at a centralized level. And that, frankly, makes people miserable. It makes the average person miserable because they have no power. They have no power over their life. They have no say because everything's at the federal level. Everything's at this massive high level, distant, removed from the people. And you try to like win an election. I mean, ask yourself as an individual, do you really feel like your voice is heard in any way, shape, or form in an election? Let's be realistic here. So again, we return the power to the states. What you get is you get lower power distance. In other words, people have more power and say over their lives because they're not one of 330 million people. They're one of maybe, you know, 1 million or 5 million or 10 million at most, if you look at like a big city that is helping decide things over their local area. And then you also get competition. You get more competition between the states. So these different states, which in this case will actually be more like almost like their own nations in many ways, with like a federal unity for military purposes and treasury purposes. But people will have so much more say over their lives, and you'll have competition between the states. So every one of these states will be trying to have the best policies, and if a state has really stupid policies, they will pay the price of that. Okay? They won't be able to attract businesses, etc. We see some of that competition already. We see a lot of people leaving certain states that are not running their things fiscally responsible, etc. And so you could also have the state could say, you know what, we're not going to accept people from other states coming in because we don't want people coming from these other states that ruin their own state and then come here and want the same policies. So states can run their own show in many ways. That would make things so much better. Number 4, we need some major system upgrades. Now, there's a lot I could go into here, but I'm just going to give you a couple highlights. And these are some insights from Propertarianism and Kurt Doolittle, the founder of Propertarianism, who's a very successful tech entrepreneur. Just a couple highlights here. A lot of the problem we have is with our system. So even numbers 1 through 3 will fix so much about our system. Number 4 is, if you kind of tie in some of these other system upgrades with that, number 1, we could have a system where there's really no national level politicians like we know about it today. You could disband the House of Representatives because, again, most of your power is going to be at the state level, much lower power distance. People would be much happier. And so Congress could basically then be, instead of having 2 directly elected congressmen, say, in the Senate, you could get rid of the House of Representatives. You could have the Senate basically be transformed into the governor of each state goes and has meetings about things, okay? And this gets rid of the arbitrary legislation that, you know, whoever wins an election can shove their will down everybody's throat with whatever legislation they can get passed, regardless of whether it's moral, regardless of whether it's scientific, regardless of whether it makes everyone miserable that doesn't happen to agree with it. Again, you have lower power distance, you have most power at the states, so you get rid of this whole national election circus. We can get rid of corporate-owned politicians. Right now, virtually all our politicians on both sides of the aisle are totally owned by the big corporations. Neither grassroots side actually likes this. Okay? The grassroots right-wingers don't like it, the grassroots left-wingers don't like it. Why should these big corporations, just because they happen to be sitting on top of a pyramid where all the money flows up to, of a business, be able to decide every single thing about our lives? They shouldn't. Well, Propertarianism has an insight about a system upgrade where we can make sure that even at the state level, you can do it this way, where the big corporations can't just own all the politicians, because it's pointless to own all the politicians under what we call proprietarian law, because you build in a check. Right now, there's no check. If the corporate politicians can just buy, the big corporations can buy all the politicians. The politicians vote for things that the big corporations want. Most of our legislation, all our legislation recently in America, the last however many years, it's all written by corporate lawyers. So the reason for that is there's no check on that. See, if they pass something from a legislative body, Congress or at the state level, if they pass something, there's no check on it. There's no way to stop it if it violates what we would call natural law, or there's no check on it from the judiciary, from the people, from anything. And the people only have kind of indirect power through voting, but all their choices are determined by the big corporations, because that's who has the money to pay for the politicians' campaigns. So the way you fix this is you have a judicial check on the corporations, and I'm not going to go into the details of this. This is very high level, okay? And please understand, I'm not just throwing this stuff out. This is very, very well thought through in excruciating detail. I'm just giving you the very high level, all right? So please spare me the comments about, oh, that won't work because of this or that. Yeah, we've thought through it all, folks. And when I say we, I'm not primarily bragging on myself. It's the people who have, mostly Kurt Doolittle, who's thought through this. But you have a judicial check, so the judiciary can check every piece of legislation that would be passed to make sure that it doesn't violate natural law of reciprocity. Now, natural law of reciprocity, just a super brief explanation. The reason that's so important is because we can demonstrate empirically, scientifically, that if you allow violations of what we call natural law of reciprocity in your group, in your nation, in your state, you will have conflict and you will have poverty. You will go downhill. If you stop violations of reciprocity, or what we would call in colloquial language corruption, parasitism, things like this, if you stop that, the better you stop that, the more prosperous and more peaceful your group is going to be, your state, your nation. Third world nations do not do a very good job of stopping corruption and parasitism. First world nations do a much better job of it. We need to significantly improve this in America, even though we've done a pretty good job compared to most places, which is why everybody wants to move here. But we need to do an even better job, and propertarianism gives us the insights and the clarity in our rule of law to do that, so you can have a judicial check. See, a judicial check doesn't do any good if you don't have very clear science-based law. But if you have very clear science-based law and very clear jurisprudence that the judges have to follow, and they get punished if they don't, see, we've thought through this whole system, right? Then you can have the judiciary check any legislation to ensure that the big corporate-owned politicians can't just pass whatever, regardless of whether it is imposing a cost, is the language we would use, on the people. All right, so we're reducing and eliminating open doors to corruption. I could go into a lot more explanation about that. I will not. I just want to let you know that we know how to do major system upgrades. We know how to do this now, okay? There's no reason not to do it now that we know how to do it. So spread the word. And those of you who are high IQ, interested in this kind of stuff, definitely check out my videos on propertarianism. I'll put a couple links in the top comment. All right, another law upgrade. Folks, you're going to absolutely love this stuff. I touched on it a second ago. We have to have scientific clarity in our rule of law about what to punish. One of the biggest insights of propertarianism is that the key to having a first world country and a first world quality of life and a continually improving quality of life for your people is not so much like your government, it's more your law, your rule of law. And so we have pretty good rule of law in the West overall, especially compared to most places. But we can definitely improve it. And one of the things that propertarianism gives us is scientific clarity about exactly what to punish. I touched on it a second ago. I won't repeat it. But you basically have to punish any violation of reciprocity. And there's a very specific 5-point definition of reciprocity in propertarianism that propertarianism outlines. It's based on empirical observation. And if you look at that 5-point definition, you say, yeah, if I'm interacting with somebody else or another party or doing a deal of some sort, I want to ensure that every single one of those 5 points of that definition is met in the way the other person is treating me. Otherwise, I get angry. I don't like it. I don't want to do business with them. So the job of the law is to enforce those 5 points in every interaction in the group. Period. That's what the job is. Every law that you could outline that's a common sense law, like don't murder, you know, or don't steal, it's just an extension of natural law of reciprocity. But when you have that scientific language about it, you can then cover a lot more categories of things that, for example, our elites are doing and getting away with. And you can punish that because you have such clarity about it. And it's not just arbitrary. Whoever can win an election can pass whatever they want. No. So that's one upgrade. That's kind of the foundational law upgrade. Another law upgrade that kind of builds on that then is once you have that scientific clarity about what to punish, so it's not just willy-nilly people making up rules, aside from empiricism, aside from science, aside from what we know works from observation. Once you have that super clarity, then you can give legal power to the people to keep the powerful people accountable. Everybody always talks about speaking truth to power and keeping the powerful accountable. Well, people kind of think, well, voting is one way to do that. But we see the voting doesn't really work very well to do that. It kind of works in some instances, and it works much better in a smaller group at a more local level than at a national level. But this gives the people another tool, another much more powerful tool than even voting, to keep the powerful accountable. And basically what it is any person in the group, any citizen of the state or of America, has the power to take any person, no matter how powerful they are, no matter who they are, no matter what their position is, whether they're a judge, whether even judges are accountable on this, whether they're a judge, whether they're a CEO, whether they're a politician. You can't hide behind the corporate veil. You can't hide behind your position. Every individual is personally liable. Their personal assets are at risk from anything they do or say that violates the 5-point definition of reciprocity. And so what this does, what propertarian law does, is it gives any person the ability to take any other person in the group to court to stop any violation of reciprocity that any person is attempting. You see how this is much more direct power than just trying to vote. You get some corrupt politician. The only thing you can try to do is vote them out, but they got all the corporate money. And then you have to convince millions of people to try to vote them out. And most of the millions of people are too busy making a living and too busy watching Netflix and whatever to give a flying crap, right? Or to even know what the heck is going on. So the knowledgeable people are always frustrated. All you have to do under this system is, all one person has to do is walk into a courtroom and say, listen, this powerful person is violating the 5-point definition of reciprocity. The lawyers will be happy to take the case, even if the person doesn't have a lot of money, just like a lawyer is happy to take a case where, you know, if a car company puts out cars with faulty brakes because they were cutting corners and it kills people, they can be sued. All right. It's the same concept, but you just expand it to every interaction and everything that anybody does, including anything that the powerful people do. Okay, so this is incredibly powerful. I mean, I just want to jump out of my skin with excitement when I think about this. And again, I'm just giving you the high level. Okay, don't think that we're just like throwing this out here like willy-nilly. This is extremely well thought through by an extremely high IQ genius, and it has been vetted by other very extremely high IQ people. I mean, the quality of people that are in on this movement now, that are 100% on board with this, and the number of quality people is very large now. I just want you to know there's a lot of depth to this that I just cannot touch on here. This is high level, but extremely powerful. Another law upgrade is we can end fake news. Because we have scientific clarity about what to punish, we can then end fake news. We can keep public figures accountable for lies. How great would it be if public figures, whether they be a business person, whether they be a politician, whether they be an activist grassroots political person, whether they be a media talking head, to have them constantly thinking twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, should I say this? Because is there any chance that what I'm saying will not pass some basic falsehood tests? So the other thing that proprietarianism gives us, proprietarian law, is it codifies what our courtrooms in the West have been doing for centuries to smoke out lies, to try to figure out what the truth is. Okay, and our courtrooms actually do a pretty good job of that overall. And by the way, proprietarian law also fixes a lot of this judicial abuse that we have, makes the jurisprudence very, very clear, which the original Constitution unfortunately didn't do as well as it maybe could have. They just didn't know how to do it back then. Now we know. Okay, so it cleans up the judiciary a lot. But under proprietarian law, basically what it does is it codifies truth-seeking in a courtroom, which is the foundation of civilization, by the way. And so it codifies it into several falsehood tests. Okay, so a public figure would not have to prove 100% that everything they're saying is true, because that's very hard to do. But what they would have to do is just make sure that it passes several basic falsehood tests. So, for example, you can't lie by omission. Lying by omission, leaving out pertinent data and making a claim based on just a small subset of the data that fits your narrative, see? Or advocating for a policy based on a subset of the data that fits your narrative and ignoring the other data, see? That's just lying. It's lying. And we have this huge problem with fake news. And I'm not going to go into this whole thing here. So instead of 100% free speech, it's basically free, truthful speech. And we already have limits on free speech now. For example, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater without getting in trouble with the law, because you're endangering other people. Well, the fact is, every lie that comes out of a public figure's mouth actually causes harm. It causes harm to somebody. Many times it causes harm to a lot of people. So if you want to keep public figures accountable for lies and do it in a scientific way where it's not willy-nilly, where if you go into a courtroom, and you better be right, because if you don't, you're going to be paying the other person's legal fees. You better have a strong case. But you go in and you say, listen, what this person is saying does not pass one of these falsehood tests. It blatantly violates one of these falsehood tests. And so what you would have is, we would have so much cleaner what we call informational commons, because information is actually like a product, okay, that people quote unquote buy and that people use to make decisions. If the information is bad, it's very hard to make good decisions. We're seeing this with this bug situation right now as of the time I'm recording this video. If you don't have good information, you can't make good decisions. Well, if everybody's polluting the informational commons, as we call it in propertarianism, good decisions can't be made. So people who pollute the informational commons with blatant lies that don't pass basic scientific falsehood tests should not be able to do that. They should be liable. Why should they be able to lie to us with impunity? They shouldn't. Now, if you say, well, I don't want this idea, then, okay, what's your solution for fake news? All right, and the problem with free speech is lies are much easier to tell than, it's much easier to just tell a lie to try to get what you want than it is to actually do your due diligence to tell the truth. As the old saying goes, a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth even gets its pants on. That's a problem, see? Lying is easier than truth. And one of the biggest keys to civilizational success is truth. Not being able to say whatever you want. The whole idea of free speech is that it gives the truth a chance. Well, we see now that the truth doesn't have much chance with the technology of mass media. Many, many times the truth doesn't even have a chance. You have whole segments of the population being whipped up into a frenzy and harming other people and getting angry at other people based on lies. And I'm not even pointing fingers at one particular side here. I mean, we could all point fingers at a gazillion different examples because we all know this is a problem. All right, so that's a big one. I mean, if you can just imagine for a moment the benefit, that this will bring so much benefit in the social and political realm that it will be equivalent to the benefit we got in the scientific and engineering realm from the discovery of the scientific method. Because it's basically forcing public figures to apply the scientific method to their own speech, instead of making the public try to sort it out, figure out truth from lies. Number 8, keeping the elites accountable. Having the elites be held accountable for their crimes. All of us know, anybody who's paying half attention, we know, grassroots right, grassroots left, we know that the elites are a bunch of scumbags in many cases. Not all of them. Not everything the elites do is bad. I'm not saying it's bad for an elite person to have a lot of money. I'm not saying that. But we all know that these people just, they get power, they get money, they do whatever the heck they want because they can. This law upgrade number 6 that I was talking about, and number 7, allows the people to keep the elites accountable and make the elites accountable for their crimes. And we can try elites that are doing scumbag stuff, the people who hang out with the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, for example, we can keep them accountable and punish them for their crimes because we have the scientific clarity in our law to do that now. And proprietarian law, if we implement it, gives the people the power to do that, to punish elites for doing stuff that is harmful to the people. And we can do it in a scientific way, not a willy-nilly way. And then number 9, people on the left might not like this one as much, but I think with this new bug situation in America that we've been going through, the studies show that this is now actually the great majority of Americans, 80% of Americans, now support stopping immigration, at least temporarily. Okay, so if you don't do number 9, you might as well throw the other 8 into the garbage bin. If you don't end globalism and mass immigration, because if you're on the left, let me give you a newsflash. The corporate elites are using this for their own purposes. They don't care about non-white people. They don't care about immigrants. They care about cheap labor. They're using it to undercut the value of your labor as an American. And please understand, I'm not saying this out of hate for anybody, hate for any group of people. I'm saying this out of practicality. The practical reality, folks, is the people of a nation, the people of a state, the people of a city, the people of a group want their leaders to be on their side. Okay? There's no such thing as having a kumbaya world where everybody just holds hands and dances around a campfire. It will not happen. Do you really think that China is our friend? Please tell me, is there anyone left that is stupid enough to think that China actually would ever, make a single decision that has the best interests of Americans in mind? No, they look out for themselves. That's just the reality. If you can't handle the reality of that, you should not be able to make decisions because you're basing your decisions on a lie. Now, I'm not saying we have to, treat everyone else as if they're pure evil. That's not what I'm saying. The point is, forget Kumbaya world. Realize that the big corporate overlords are pushing mass immigration and globalism for their own purposes because they want cheap labor. Period. Okay? So, what I am saying here is that the American people, and we see this with this bug situation, the American people must look out for themselves first. And if you're on the left, and I'm trying to make this a very bipartisan message in case you can't tell, I know my core audience is on board with this thing, and there's more things that we could go into for my core right-wing audience of how in the red areas we can do some fantastic things, some fantastic innovations on this that the conservative people will love, okay? Right-wing people will love it for the red areas. But even for a bipartisan message, I mean, the left has got to see this globalism thing is a tool of the corporate elites, okay? They don't care about you. They want cheap labor. They want your labor not to be worth much. They don't care if it exposes us to risk of pandemics. All right? They just want to make money in the short term. Somebody has got to say no to these people. That somebody is us. No big corporate big shots. Just because you sit at the top of a big money pyramid doesn't mean you get to make all the decisions. We are going to implement some smart system upgrades here. We're going to end this whole globalism and mass immigration thing because it is causing massive conflict. Now, if the blue areas want to have some more immigration, the whole point here is that we're not shoving our will down each other's throats. But I can tell you, if you do that, you're exposing yourself to risk. Not least of which is pandemics. But people come in from other places and they have their own agendas. We know scientifically people are very tribal. We know scientifically why it is, okay? People are born that way. And you have to understand white people of Western European descent are, because of some unique history that we have, we're very unique in that regard. All right? The rest of the world is 100% tribal, unapologetically. All right? So let's deal with reality. All right? This whole globalism and mass immigration thing is like a big fantasy that everything's going to somehow be okay. It's not. The American people have to, however you want to do it, in your blue area, in your red area, the leaders have to let the people know that they are on the people's team, that they are fighting for their own people. Because as soon as the people start to feel like the leaders don't have their best interest in mind anymore, which is the American people definitely feel that on both sides now, as soon as that happens, you get anger, you get upheaval, you get conflict, you get revolutions, which is what we're seeing in America now, okay? So number 9 is all about let's deal with reality. The way to have the most peace is to have different strokes for different folks, to have each group of people, each smaller polity, maybe the size of a state in America or the size of a nation in Europe, for example, with their own leaders that look out for the best interests of their own people, and then everybody trades with each other. All the different nations and polities interact with each other under natural law of reciprocity, like I was talking about before. Because if you don't, if anybody violates natural law of reciprocity at any point, there's going to be a retaliation because people don't like it. So let's end this fantasy. And I think even many left-wingers, or at least center and some center-left people, can get on board with this now. You've got all sorts of risk. When we have our supply chain for our medical supplies and our pharmaceutical supplies and our medicine and our aspirin and whatever, 90% dependent on China, you really think that's a good idea? You really think it's a good idea to be dependent on the Middle East for oil? America is one of the only places, if not the only place on earth, that is capable of being completely self-sufficient from a natural resource perspective, or very close to completely self-sufficient. And we have the biggest economy in the world if you look at our whole landmass. We have tremendous power to do well by our own people. And then we can help the rest of the world. If you have a heart to help the rest of the world, then you help them where they're at. And if you're a blue area and you want to have some mass immigration, I guess the whole point is that the red areas don't try to stop you, but we can tell you what's going to happen from that, okay? What you get is a bunch of tribal fights. Even if you took all the white people away, the Hispanics would start fighting the blacks, and they would not like the Asians. And everybody would fight with every other group, okay? If you look at a racial map of New York City, it's not actually multicultural. It's just a bunch of different boroughs, a bunch of different neighborhoods where people cluster together by race and ethnicity. There's no actual thing such as multiculturalism. The synonym for multiculturalism is fighting. And there's all these other economic risks and supply chain risks and all this stuff. So, I mean, if this pandemic doesn't teach you that, nothing's going to teach you that, I would suppose. We need to end this globalism and mass immigration, have every local area, again, have low power distance, have every local area, the leaders looking out for their own people, and everybody trades with each other with reciprocity. That is the way to maximize peace on earth and maximize the happiness of the people of America, because everybody in America in their local area can know that their leaders are looking out for their best interest, because we're just saying no to this globalism and mass immigration thing. And a lot of that is stopped even by these upgrades in law, because globalism and mass immigration basically amount to the leaders of a group of people, if they engage in that, are violating reciprocity towards their people. And I can show you that with the legal definitions. I won't bother to do that now. Those are 9 steps that we can and must take. Incredibly powerful steps, folks. Quick recap. Number 1, separate red areas from blue. Number 2, end the Fed and replace it with the Treasury. You get a mortgage or a car loan from the Treasury at 0 interest, instead of paying massive interest to bankers who do nothing but sit on their rear ends and type numbers into a computer. I'm exaggerating slightly, but you get the point. Number 3, return most federal power to the states. Number 4, major system upgrades so we don't have these national political fights, politicians that are completely owned by big corporations, reducing and eliminating these huge open doors to corruption that our current system has. Law upgrades, incredible scientific clarity about what needs to be punished. Law upgrade about giving the people power to punish elites and powerful people using rule of law. Ending fake news. Keeping the elites accountable for their crimes. And ending globalism and mass immigration, which cause tremendous unrest and make the people of a local area or of a nation feel like their leaders are not actually looking out for their best interests. And it is actually a violation of natural law of reciprocity of the leaders toward their own people. All this really is, folks, in a nutshell, is scientific governance. It's scientific governance. All this stuff is based on science, empiricism, empirical observation about what works and what doesn't work, to make the people happy, to give the people what they want, to give the people the ability to keep their leaders accountable, to help the people know that they're going to have leadership that actually looks out for their interests, instead of just stabbing them in the back for the leader's own self-interest over and over and over again. We can reset America. We must reset America. In this video, I've given you some basics of how to do that. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Love you all. Till next time.